A racist waitress humiliates a black woman at work, unaware of who her husband is. Aaliyah Reed stepped into the cafe, the familiar scent of roasted coffee beans enveloping her like a warm hug. It was a busy lunch hour, and the vibrant atmosphere buzzed with conversation, laughter, and the clinking of dishes. Colorful artwork adorned the walls, showcasing local artists and reflecting the community's diverse culture. Aaliyah loved this place. It was known for its commitment to inclusivity and support for local businesses. But today, the usual excitement felt overshadowed by a nagging sense of apprehension. As Aaliyah walked in with her colleagues from the marketing team, she noticed a few heads turn her way. She brushed off the attention, reminding herself that she was here to discuss an important project, not to be the center of scrutiny. They had reserved a large table at the back, and Aaliyah took a seat at the head, eager to dive into the meeting. "I hope they have that new avocado toast on the menu," said David, one of her colleagues, as he pulled out his chair. "I've heard it's amazing." "You and your avocado obsession," Aaliyah teased, a smile breaking through her initial tension. "Maybe they'll have some real food for a change." The group laughed, the camaraderie easing the weight of the day. But as they settled in and began to review their agenda, Aaliyah's gaze drifted to the front counter. There stood Brittany Ellis, the waitress. Aaliyah had heard whispers about Brittany's attitude toward black customers, but she had hoped that her experience would be different. The waitress's cheerful demeanor seemed rehearsed, the kind that masked underlying contempt. "All right, team, let's focus," Aaliyah said, attempting to steer the conversation back to business. "We need to finalize the marketing strategy for the upcoming campaign." Just then, Brittany approached their table, her notepad in hand. "What can I get for you today?" she asked, her voice overly bright, but Aaliyah sensed a sharp edge lurking beneath the surface. "I'll have the quinoa salad, please," Aaliyah said, trying to keep her tone professional. Brittany nodded, her smile faltering as she turned to the next colleague. "And for you, sir?" she continued, her attention flicking back to Aaliyah as if she had forgotten who she was speaking to. "I'll take the burger," David replied, oblivious to the tension. "Of course, that's a real meal," Brittany smirked, her eyes narrowing slightly as she glanced at Aaliyah. "Not like that rabbit food." The comment sliced through the air, and Aaliyah felt her cheeks flush. A mix of anger and embarrassment surged within her, a familiar feeling she had encountered countless times before. It was as if Brittany had taken aim at her with that remark, the kind of microaggression that had become all too common in her life. "Excuse me?" Aaliyah said, her voice steady but laced with disbelief. "I think it's a personal choice." Brittany leaned in slightly, her expression shifting from feigned politeness to something more sinister. "Sure, but I just thought you'd want to keep that figure of yours. You know, given your job and all." The laughter around the table dissipated, replaced by an uncomfortable silence. Aaliyah's colleagues exchanged glances, unsure whether to intervene or let her handle it. Aaliyah took a deep breath, forcing herself to remain composed. This was not just a matter of pride. It was about respect. "What's your name again?" Aaliyah asked, trying to keep her tone neutral. "Brittany," the waitress replied, a hint of challenge in her voice. "Well, Brittany, it seems you're mistaken. My choice of food does not define my worth or my capabilities. I'm here for a business meeting, and I'd appreciate it if you could keep your comments professional." Aaliyah felt the weight of her colleagues' eyes on her, a mixture of admiration and concern. Brittany's smile faltered, and for a moment, Aaliyah thought she saw a flicker of uncertainty in the waitress's eyes, but it vanished just as quickly, replaced by a scowl. "Whatever you say, lady," Brittany retorted, rolling her eyes. "I'll get your salad." She turned and walked away, her steps brisk and purposeful, the tension lingering in the air like a storm cloud. Aaliyah's heart raced as she gathered herself. She could feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins, a mixture of anger and determination. "I can't believe she said that," David said, breaking the silence. "Are you okay, Aaliyah?" "Yeah, I'm fine," Aaliyah replied, though her voice wavered slightly. "I just hate that kind of disrespect." "You handled it well," another colleague chimed in, offering support. "It's not easy to confront that kind of behavior." Aaliyah appreciated their encouragement, but she couldn't shake the feeling of humiliation. She had stood up for herself, but the sting of Brittany's words lingered. It wasn't just about the comment. It was about the underlying prejudice that had been allowed to fester in a place that prided itself on community and inclusivity. The group tried to refocus on their meeting, but Aaliyah found it hard to concentrate. Her mind raced as she replayed the encounter, grappling with the feelings of anger and frustration. How could someone be so ignorant and cruel? She had worked hard to earn her position, and yet here she was, facing judgment based on her appearance and choices. "Let's move on to the next point on the agenda," Aaliyah said, attempting to regain control of the conversation. But deep down, she knew this wasn't over. Brittany's behavior was a reflection of a larger issue, one that she had encountered throughout her career. Just then, Brittany returned with Aaliyah's salad, placing it on the table with a flourish. "Here's your rabbit food," she said with a smirk, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Aaliyah felt a surge of anger rise within her. This wasn't just about her, it was about all the people who had been subjected to this kind of treatment. She glanced at her colleagues, who looked on with concern and knew she had to make a stand. "You know, Brittany," Aaliyah said, her voice calm but firm, "your comments are offensive. It's not just about what I eat, it's about how you treat people. Everyone deserves respect, regardless of their choices." Brittany's expression faltered, and for a brief moment, Aaliyah thought she might actually reconsider her behavior. But then Brittany folded her arms, a defensive posture taking hold. "I'm just saying what everyone thinks," she shot back, her bravado returning. "You might want to reconsider that," Aaliyah replied, feeling the weight of her words. "Comments like yours perpetuate stereotypes and hurt people. You have no idea what I've faced to be where I am today." The cafe's atmosphere grew tense as other customers began to take notice. Aaliyah's heart raced, but she pressed on. "I'm not here to be belittled. I'm here to work and collaborate, just like everyone else at this table." At that moment, the cafe manager approached, sensing the escalating situation. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, looking between Aaliyah and Brittany. Aaliyah took a deep breath, her resolve firm. "No, it's not. I'm being treated disrespectfully because of my choices, and it's unacceptable." The manager glanced at Brittany, who shifted uncomfortably. "Brittany, we have a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination here. This behavior is unacceptable." Aaliyah felt a swell of relief wash over her. She wasn't alone in this fight. The manager recognized the importance of standing up for his customers. "Thank you," Aaliyah said, her voice steady. As the manager addressed Brittany, Aaliyah turned to her colleagues, who were watching with a mix of admiration and concern. "I just want to create an environment where everyone feels respected," she said quietly. "You're doing that," David replied. "You're showing us all how to stand up for ourselves." Aaliyah felt a rush of gratitude. She had taken a stand, and it was empowering. But she also knew that this battle was far from over. Brittany's reaction had shown her that ignorance could rear its head anywhere, even in a place that prided itself on community. The cafe manager continued speaking with Brittany, and Aaliyah couldn't help but listen. "We value inclusivity here, and we expect our staff to uphold those values," he said firmly. "I'll need to speak with you about this later." As Brittany's face flushed with embarrassment, Aaliyah felt a sense of satisfaction wash over her. She had stood up for herself, and in doing so, had sparked a conversation about respect and dignity. The cafe was a space meant for connection and community, and Aaliyah was determined to ensure it remained that way. As the cafe manager continued to address Brittany, Aaliyah felt a mix of relief and lingering frustration. She had taken a stand, and while the immediate confrontation had been resolved, the underlying issues were far from over. The cafe's atmosphere was still charged with tension, and she knew that Brittany's behavior was a reflection of a broader societal problem. Aaliyah turned her focus back to her colleagues, who were whispering among themselves, clearly concerned about the situation. "We should probably continue with our meeting," Aaliyah suggested, hoping to redirect their attention. "We have a lot to cover." "Right," David replied, though his voice was still tinged with uncertainty. "But are you okay? That was really intense." Aaliyah nodded, forcing a smile. "I'm fine, just frustrated. It's tiring to keep having to deal with this kind of ignorance." She glanced back at Brittany, who was now standing at the counter, her arms crossed defiantly. The waitress's expression was a mix of anger and embarrassment, and Aaliyah could only imagine the thoughts racing through her mind. "You handled it like a pro," another colleague chimed in. "I wouldn't have been able to keep my cool." Aaliyah appreciated the support, but her mind was still swirling. She had always been the one to advocate for herself and others, but the weight of it all felt heavy today. It wasn't just about her. It was about everyone who had ever faced prejudice or disrespect. She wanted to create change, but how much could one person do? Taking a deep breath, Aaliyah opened her laptop, pulling up the marketing strategy they had been working on. "Let's get back to business," she said, trying to push aside the lingering tension. "We need to finalize the campaign for the upcoming product launch." As the discussion shifted back to work, Aaliyah found herself focusing on the task at hand. They brainstormed ideas, tossing around marketing slogans and strategies. The energy in the room began to shift, and Aaliyah felt the camaraderie return. They were a strong team, and together they could accomplish great things. But every so often, Aaliyah's gaze would drift to Brittany, who was now taking orders at another table. The waitress was chatting with a group of customers, her demeanor a stark contrast to what Aaliyah had just witnessed. It was as if the incident had never happened, as if Brittany could compartmentalize her behavior and move on without consequence. Aaliyah couldn't shake the feeling that this was part of a larger pattern. After about 30 minutes, Aaliyah's focus shifted again as she noticed a commotion at the front of the cafe. A group of customers had gathered, and Aaliyah could hear snippets of conversation about the incident. The cafe was known for its community-first philosophy, and word of Brittany's behavior had begun to spread. "I can't believe she said that," one customer exclaimed. "That's so unprofessional." Aaliyah felt a surge of gratitude for the patrons who were speaking out. It was heartening to see people rallying against prejudice, even if they were strangers. She hoped that this moment would inspire a broader conversation about respect and inclusivity. Just then, the cafe manager approached Aaliyah's table, his expression serious but supportive. "Aaliyah, I wanted to thank you for standing up for yourself. It takes courage to confront that type of behavior." "Thank you," Aaliyah replied, grateful for his acknowledgement. "I just want to make sure everyone feels welcome here." "That's the spirit," he said, nodding. "We're looking to implement some training for our staff to address issues like this. It's important that everyone understands the impact of their words." Aaliyah felt a rush of relief. "That's a great idea. I think it's crucial for places like this to foster a culture of respect." The manager smiled. "Exactly. We want to be part of the solution, not the problem. And if you're willing, I'd love for you to be involved in the training sessions. Your perspective would be invaluable." Aaliyah blinked in surprise. She hadn't expected that offer, but it resonated deeply with her desire to create change. "I'd be honored to help," she said, her voice filled with conviction. "I believe it's important for all voices to be heard." As the manager walked away, Aaliyah felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was her chance to make a real difference, not just for herself, but for others who had faced similar situations. The cafe could become a beacon of inclusivity, and she wanted to be a part of that journey. The meeting continued, and Aaliyah found herself more engaged than ever. They discussed strategies and creative ideas, the earlier tension dissipating as they worked together. Laughter filled the air as her colleagues shared anecdotes and brainstormed catchy slogans. For a moment, Aaliyah felt a sense of normalcy return. But just as things seemed to settle, Brittany approached their table again, this time with a more cautious demeanor. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for what I said earlier," she said, her tone lacking its previous bravado. "I didn't mean to offend you." Aaliyah raised an eyebrow, surprised by the sudden shift. "Apology accepted," she replied, though she couldn't help but feel skeptical. "But it's important to understand why those comments are hurtful." Brittany nodded, her expression unreadable. "I get that now. I guess I let my insecurities get the better of me." Aaliyah felt a flicker of empathy. "We all have our moments, Brittany, but it's how we choose to respond that defines us." After a brief, awkward silence, Brittany muttered an acknowledgement before walking away, leaving Aaliyah and her colleagues in stunned silence. "Did that just happen?" David asked, clearly taken aback. "I think she's starting to realize how her behavior affects others," Aaliyah said, contemplating Brittany's words. "It's a step, albeit a small one." The group resumed their discussion, but Aaliyah felt her mind racing. Had Brittany genuinely changed, or was this just a superficial attempt to placate her? It was hard to say, but Aaliyah knew that change didn't happen overnight. She hoped that this moment would spark something deeper, both for Brittany and for the cafe as a whole. As the meeting wrapped up, Aaliyah felt a mixture of triumph and exhaustion. She had stood up for herself, and in doing so, she had opened the door for dialogue. Perhaps Brittany's apology was the beginning of a new chapter, not just for her, but for everyone in the cafe. After finishing their meal and finalizing their plans, Aaliyah and her colleagues stood to leave. As she walked toward the door, she paused to look back at the cafe. It was a vibrant space filled with potential. And she was determined that it would remain a place where everyone felt accepted and valued. "Let's make it a point to come back soon," Aaliyah said to her colleagues. "We can support the cafe and continue this conversation." They all nodded in agreement, and Aaliyah felt a sense of hope wash over her. Change was possible, but it required effort and conversation. She walked out of the cafe with her head held high, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The following week was a whirlwind of activity for Aaliyah. The marketing campaign launch was fast approaching, and she found herself juggling multiple deadlines and responsibilities. But amidst the chaos, she couldn't shake the memory of the incident at the cafe. Brittany's words, though seemingly insignificant in the grand scheme of things, had struck a chord within her. It wasn't just about the microaggression itself. It was about the underlying prejudice that permeated society, often disguised as harmless banter. Aaliyah had agreed to participate in the cafe's diversity training, and she spent hours preparing for the session. She wanted to create a meaningful dialogue, one that would not only educate the staff, but also empower them to challenge their own biases. She drew on her own experiences, crafting a presentation that addressed the subtle yet impactful ways prejudice could manifest in everyday interactions. As the day of the training approached, Aaliyah felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. She knew that some of the staff might be resistant to the message, particularly Brittany, but she was determined to make a difference, to create a ripple effect that would extend beyond the cafe walls. On the morning of the training, Aaliyah arrived early, setting up her laptop and reviewing her notes one last time. The cafe was quiet, the usual hustle and bustle replaced by a sense of anticipation. Soon the staff began to trickle in, their expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. Aaliyah recognized Brittany among the group, the waitress's face a mask of indifference. The cafe manager, whose name was Michael, welcomed everyone and introduced Aaliyah. "We're incredibly fortunate to have Aaliyah here today to lead our diversity training," he said, his voice warm and encouraging. "She's a respected member of our community and a powerful advocate for inclusivity." Aaliyah smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude for Michael's support. She took a deep breath and began her presentation, her voice clear and confident. "I want to start by sharing a personal story," she said, recounting her experience with Brittany the previous week. She described the subtle microaggressions and the impact they had on her, emphasizing the importance of empathy and understanding. As she spoke, Aaliyah noticed a shift in the room. Some of the staff members were nodding along, their expressions thoughtful. Others, including Brittany, seemed less receptive, their arms crossed defensively. Aaliyah pressed on, sharing examples of everyday prejudice and offering strategies for creating a more inclusive environment. "It's not always about overt discrimination," she explained. "Sometimes it's the subtle comments, the unconscious biases, that can have the most profound impact." She encouraged the staff to challenge their own assumptions and to speak up when they witnessed injustice. During the Q&A session, several staff members raised questions about how to address specific situations, demonstrating a genuine desire to learn. Aaliyah answered their questions thoughtfully, providing practical advice and resources. But when it came time for Brittany to speak, her tone was laced with defensiveness. "I don't see why we need all this training," she said, her voice sharp. "I treat everyone the same." Aaliyah met Brittany's gaze, her expression unwavering. "Treating everyone the same isn't always equitable," she replied. "Sometimes we need to acknowledge the different challenges people face and adjust our approach accordingly." She shared an analogy about providing equal resources versus equitable resources, explaining how the latter addresses systemic disadvantages. Brittany's face flushed, and Aaliyah could see the frustration building within her. "So you're saying I'm prejudiced?" she challenged, her voice rising. Aaliyah took a deep breath, reminding herself to stay calm. "I'm saying that we all have biases, conscious or unconscious. The key is to recognize them and work to dismantle them." The tension in the room thickened, and Michael stepped in to mediate the conversation. "Brittany, this training is about creating a more welcoming environment for everyone," he said gently. It's not about pointing fingers or assigning blame. Brittany's expression softened slightly, but she remained unconvinced. I just don't see how this applies to me, she muttered, her gaze averted. Aaliyah decided to take a different approach. Brittany, think about the customers who walk through these doors every day, she said, her voice softer now. They come from all walks of life, with different experiences and perspectives. By understanding their challenges, we can create a space where everyone feels valued and respected. Brittany remained silent, her eyes fixed on the floor. Aaliyah could sense the internal struggle within her, the clash between her defensiveness and the possibility of growth. She hoped that this moment would plant a seed, that Brittany would eventually embrace the opportunity to learn and change. The training continued, and Aaliyah shared more stories and examples, emphasizing the importance of empathy and communication. She encouraged the staff to create a culture of accountability where they could challenge each other's biases and work together to create a more inclusive environment. As the session drew to a close, Aaliyah felt a sense of accomplishment. She had sparked a conversation, and while not everyone was receptive, she knew that the seeds of change had been planted. She thanked the staff for their participation and encouraged them to continue the dialogue. As the staff began to disperse, Michael approached Aaliyah, his expression grateful. Thank you so much for this, Aaliyah, he said, shaking her hand. You've really made a difference. I hope so, Aaliyah replied, her voice filled with hope. It's a journey, not a destination. Just then, Brittany approached Aaliyah, her expression hesitant. Can I talk to you for a minute? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Aaliyah nodded, surprised but intrigued. She followed Brittany to a quiet corner of the cafe, wondering what the waitress wanted to say. This could be a turning point, a chance for real dialogue and understanding. Aaliyah took a deep breath, preparing herself for whatever might come next. She was ready to listen, to learn, and to continue the fight for inclusivity. As Aaliyah followed Brittany to a quieter corner of the cafe, a sense of anticipation hung in the air. The training session had stirred up a range of emotions, and Aaliyah was curious to see how Brittany would process the information and whether she would be open to further dialogue. They settled at a small table near the window, the bustling street scene outside a stark contrast to the quiet intensity of their impending conversation. I don't know where to start, Brittany began, her voice hesitant, a stark contrast to her usual bravado. She fidgeted with her hands, avoiding eye contact. Aaliyah offered a gentle smile. Take your time, she said, her tone reassuring. There's no pressure. Brittany took a deep breath, as if gathering her thoughts. I guess I never really thought about how my words affect other people, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. I say things without thinking sometimes. Aaliyah nodded, acknowledging the difficulty of confronting one's own biases. We all do that sometimes, Brittany, but it's important to be mindful of the impact our words can have, especially when they perpetuate harmful stereotypes. Brittany finally met Aaliyah's gaze, her eyes filled with a mixture of shame and uncertainty. I'm not a bad person, she said, her voice pleading. I didn't realize. Aaliyah reached across the table, placing a hand on Brittany's arm. I believe you, Brittany, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me about this. Brittany's shoulders relaxed slightly, as if a weight had been lifted. I've been thinking about what you said during the training, she continued, her voice gaining strength, about how everyone deserves respect, regardless of their background. Exactly, Aaliyah affirmed, her heart filled with hope. It's about creating a space where everyone feels welcome and valued. I want to be a part of that, Brittany said, her voice now firm. I want to learn how to be better. Aaliyah smiled, genuinely touched by Brittany's sincerity. That's all anyone can ask for, she said. It's a journey, and we're all learning together. They spent the next hour discussing ways to create a more inclusive environment in the cafe. Brittany shared some of her own experiences, revealing insecurities and anxieties that had contributed to her defensive behavior. Aaliyah listened empathetically, offering support and guidance. It was a powerful moment of connection, a bridge built between two individuals who had started on opposite sides of a divide. As their conversation drew to a close, Brittany's demeanor had transformed. The defensiveness had melted away, replaced by a sense of vulnerability and a genuine desire to grow. Thank you, Aaliyah, she said, her voice filled with gratitude. You've really opened my eyes. Thank you for being open to this conversation, Brittany, Aaliyah replied, feeling a surge of optimism. This is just the beginning. They stood up and Aaliyah gave Brittany a hug, a gesture of solidarity and shared purpose. As Aaliyah walked out of the cafe, she felt a sense of lightness she hadn't felt in days. The training session, though initially challenging, had ultimately led to a powerful moment of connection and growth. She had not only educated the staff, but had also sparked a personal transformation in Brittany. The following day, Aaliyah received a text message from Michael. Just wanted to let you know that Brittany has been a completely different person since the training, he wrote. She's taking the initiative to create a more welcoming environment, and the other staff members are following her lead. You've truly made a difference, Aaliyah. Aaliyah smiled, her heart swelling with pride. It was a testament to the power of dialogue and the potential for change within individuals and communities. She had taken a stand, not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever felt marginalized or excluded. Later that week, Aaliyah found herself back at the cafe with her colleagues for another working lunch. As they settled at their usual table, Aaliyah noticed Brittany approaching with a warm smile. "Welcome back," Brittany said, her voice genuine and welcoming. "What can I get for you today?" Aaliyah smiled back, feeling a sense of warmth and camaraderie. "I'll have the steak salad, please," she replied, her voice filled with confidence. Brittany nodded, her smile widening. "Coming right up," she said, and as she walked away, Aaliyah exchanged glances with her colleagues, a shared sense of satisfaction passing between them. The cafe felt different now, lighter, more welcoming. It was a space where respect and inclusivity were not just ideals but tangible realities. As they waited for their food, Aaliyah's phone buzzed with a notification. It was a message from her husband, David, not her colleague, but her actual husband, the owner of the cafe. "Heard about the training. Proud of you, babe," the message read, followed by a heart emoji. Aaliyah's eyes widened in surprise. She had deliberately kept her relationship with David a secret from her colleagues and the cafe staff, wanting to avoid any perception of special treatment. She hadn't realized that Michael had put two and two together. A wave of warmth spread through her as she realized that her actions had resonated not only with the staff and community, but also with the person she loved most. Aaliyah quickly typed a reply, a playful mix of gratitude and surprise. "You knew all along, didn't you?" she wrote back, adding a winking emoji. David's response was almost instantaneous. "Maybe," he teased, "but I wanted to see you shine." Aaliyah smiled, feeling a sense of completeness. She had taken a stand, not just for herself, but for the values she believed in. And in doing so, she had created a ripple effect of positive change, one that had touched the lives of those around her, including the person closest to her heart. The cafe, once a place of tension and discomfort, had become a symbol of hope and transformation. And Aaliyah, the woman who had walked in with a sense of apprehension, now sat at the table, her heart filled with gratitude and a quiet sense of triumph. As the days turned into weeks, the atmosphere at the cafe continued to shift. Brittany's transformation had a ripple effect on the staff. Camaraderie blossomed, and conversations about respect and inclusivity became commonplace. Aaliyah felt a sense of pride each time she walked through the cafe doors, witnessing the positive changes unfold. The staff greeted customers with genuine warmth, and the community began to embrace the cafe as a hub for connection and understanding. But amidst this progress, Aaliyah remained vigilant. She knew that change could be fragile, easily upended by ignorance or complacency. While Brittany had taken steps to be more inclusive, Aaliyah was acutely aware that old patterns could resurface if not actively challenged. One afternoon, as Aaliyah sat at a corner table reviewing marketing strategies for the upcoming product launch, she overheard a conversation at a nearby table. A group of patrons were laughing, but Aaliyah could sense an underlying tension in their words. "I can't believe how obsessed people are with being woke these days," one man said dismissively, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "It's like they think they're better than everyone else just because they pretend to care about issues." Aaliyah's heart sank as she listened. It was a familiar refrain, one she had encountered many times before. The disdain for discussions about inclusivity and social justice often masked deeper insecurities and prejudices. She glanced over at Brittany, who was serving a different table, her expression neutral. Aaliyah wondered if Brittany would be able to recognize the harmful undertones in that conversation. Taking a deep breath, Aaliyah decided to take action. She rose from her seat and approached the group, her heart pounding in her chest. "Excuse me," she said, her voice steady. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation." The group looked up, surprise flickering across their faces. The man who had spoken first raised an eyebrow, clearly unprepared for this interruption. "And who are you?" he asked, a hint of arrogance in his tone. "My name is Aliyah, and I work here," she replied, her voice firm. "I just wanted to point out that discussions about inclusivity and respect are important. They create a better environment for everyone." The man scoffed, crossing his arms defiantly. "Oh, so you think you're the moral police now?" Aliyah felt a surge of frustration but remained composed. "It's not about being the moral police. It's about recognizing that words have power. They can uplift or hurt people, and it's essential to be mindful of that." One of the women at the table, who had been quiet up until now, spoke up. "I think it's great that you want to promote inclusivity, but sometimes it feels like people are overly sensitive." Aliyah took a moment to consider her response. "Sensitivity isn't a weakness, it's a sign of empathy. When we challenge ourselves to understand others' experiences, we create a more compassionate world." The man rolled his eyes. "Compassion doesn't mean you have to tiptoe around everyone's feelings. People need to toughen up." "And what about those who are already facing challenges?" Aliyah shot back, feeling the heat of the moment build. "Why should they have to bear the weight of indifference?" The conversation grew tense, and Aliyah could feel the eyes of other customers on them. She had entered this exchange with the hope of fostering dialogue, but now it felt like she was facing a wall of resistance. She knew she had to remain calm and focused. "Look," Aliyah continued, her voice steady but compassionate, "I'm not here to attack anyone. I'm here to encourage a conversation about respect. We all come from different backgrounds and experiences, and acknowledging that is the first step toward understanding." The man scoffed again, but Aliyah could see a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. The atmosphere had shifted slightly. The other patrons at the table were exchanging glances, some nodding in agreement with Aliyah's points. "Maybe you're right," the woman said finally, "but it just feels like we're constantly being told how to think." "It's not about being told how to think," Aliyah replied, her tone softer now. "It's about inviting more perspectives into the conversation. No one is asking you to abandon your beliefs. We're just asking for openness." The man shifted in his seat, and Aliyah noticed a hint of defensiveness in his posture. But the tension had lessened, and she seized the opportunity. "Why don't we all share our experiences? Maybe we'll find some common ground." Aliyah extended the invitation, hoping to create a space for dialogue rather than confrontation. The woman at the table seemed intrigued, her curiosity piqued. "All right, I'm willing to listen," she said, glancing at her friends. The man opened his mouth to object but hesitated, as if weighing his options. Finally, he shrugged. "Fine, I guess I can give it a shot." As Aliyah settled into the conversation, she felt a rush of hope. Maybe this was the breakthrough she had been seeking. She began by sharing her own experiences, recounting the challenges she faced as a Black woman in the workplace, and the importance of having a support system. "I've had to learn to advocate for myself," Aliyah said, her voice steady. "And I believe it's crucial for all of us to lift each other up." The conversation shifted, and the group began to share their own stories. The man spoke about his upbringing, the struggles he faced, and how they shaped his perspective. The woman shared her experiences with gender bias in her own workplace, and Aliyah listened intently, finding commonalities in their experiences. As the discussion flowed, Aliyah felt a sense of connection forming. They were no longer adversaries. They were individuals sharing their stories, vulnerabilities, and points of view. The cafe around them buzzed with activity, but in that moment, it felt like the world had narrowed to just them. After some time, Aliyah noticed Brittany watching from a distance, a look of contemplation on her face. Aliyah felt a swell of pride. Brittany had the potential to be a bridge between these patrons and the cafe's commitment to inclusivity. When the conversation came to a natural pause, Aliyah turned to the group. "Thank you all for being willing to share your thoughts," she said, a smile spreading across her face. "It takes courage to engage in these discussions, and I appreciate your openness." The man nodded, his earlier defensiveness fading. "You know, I didn't expect to feel this way. It was good to talk." "I agree," the woman added. "Thanks for calling us out. I think I'll be more mindful in the future." As they wrapped up, Aliyah felt a sense of accomplishment wash over her. She had facilitated a conversation that had the potential to plant seeds of understanding in the hearts of those who had initially resisted. But as she turned to leave, she felt a sudden pang of anxiety. Had she done enough? Would the change be lasting, or would they slip back into old habits? Just then, Brittany approached, her expression thoughtful. "Aaliyah, that was really brave," she said, her voice filled with admiration. "I wish I could be more like you." Aaliyah smiled, feeling a sense of connection with Brittany again. "You can be, Brittany. We all have the capacity to grow and change. It's about being willing to listen and learn." Brittany nodded, her eyes brightening. "I want to help create that kind of environment here. I really do." Aaliyah felt a spark of hope. "Then let's work together on it. The more voices we have advocating for change, the stronger our message will be." As Aaliyah left the cafe that day, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She had navigated a challenging conversation, and while there was still work to be done, she was confident that they were moving in the right direction. Change was possible, one conversation at a time. As Aaliyah walked out of the cafe, her mind buzzed with possibilities. She had witnessed a transformation today, not just in her own interactions, but in how the cafe's staff and patrons related to one another. It was a reminder that change often began with a single conversation, a willingness to listen, and the courage to be vulnerable. Over the next few days, Aaliyah continued to advocate for inclusivity within the cafe. She collaborated with Brittany to develop a series of community events aimed at fostering dialogue and understanding. They brainstormed ideas for workshops and discussion panels, inviting local speakers to share their experiences and perspectives. Each event would be an opportunity for patrons and staff alike to engage in meaningful conversations about race, gender, and social justice. However, as they began organizing the first event, Aaliyah sensed pushback from some staff members. Not everyone was on board with the changes. One afternoon, while reviewing plans for the upcoming workshop with Brittany in a quiet corner of the cafe, Tyler, a longtime server, approached them, his expression skeptical. "What's with all this talk about diversity and inclusion?" Tyler asked, crossing his arms defensively. "Aren't we already doing fine? Why do we need to change anything?" Aaliyah felt a familiar tension rise within her, but she knew this was a crucial moment. "It's not about saying we're doing fine," she replied calmly. "It's about recognizing that we can always improve. Creating a welcoming environment for everyone is an ongoing process." "But it feels like we're being forced to cater to everyone's feelings," Tyler shot back. "What about our feelings?" Brittany stepped in, her tone firm but friendly. "Tyler, this isn't just about feelings. It's about creating a space where everyone, regardless of their background, can feel safe and respected. We're not trying to undermine anyone. We're trying to uplift everyone." The tension hung thick in the air, and Aaliyah could see Tyler wavering. "I get that, but it feels like we have to walk on eggshells all the time. What if we just treat people like people?" Aaliyah nodded, recognizing the validity of his concerns. "That's exactly what we're trying to do, Tyler. But we have to acknowledge that not everyone has the same experiences. For some, just being treated like a normal person means overcoming barriers that others might not see." Tyler hesitated, clearly grappling with the complexity of the issue. "I guess I just don't want to feel like I'm being accused of something I didn't do." Aaliyah softened her tone. "No one is accusing you, Tyler. We're all learning together. The goal is to create a dialogue, not to point fingers. We can grow as a team, and that will benefit everyone." After a moment, Tyler uncrossed his arms, his posture relaxing slightly. "All right, I'm willing to listen, but I can't promise I'll agree with everything." "That's all we ask," Aaliyah replied, relieved to see some progress. "Let's keep the lines of communication open." As they continued planning the first community event, Aaliyah felt a renewed sense of purpose. They decided to hold a discussion panel featuring local activists and community leaders, aiming to encourage dialogue about social justice and inclusivity. Brittany took the lead in reaching out to potential speakers, while Aaliyah focused on promoting the event. Days turned into a week, and finally, the day of the event arrived. The cafe was buzzing with energy, the walls adorned with colorful flyers promoting the panel discussion. Aaliyah stood at the entrance, greeting attendees with a smile, her heart racing with anticipation. She hoped the event would foster the open dialogue she envisioned. As the panel began, Aaliyah introduced the speakers, who shared their experiences with social injustice and the importance of community engagement. The audience listened intently, engaged in discussions that challenged their perceptions and prompted reflection. Aaliyah's heart swelled as she looked around the room, seeing patrons from various backgrounds laughing, sharing, and connecting. This was what she had hoped for, a space where people could come together to learn from one another. However, not everyone was as receptive. During the Q&A portion, a familiar voice piped up from the back of the room. It was the man from the cafe who had dismissed the idea of inclusivity a week earlier. "I still don't see why this is necessary," he said, his tone dripping with skepticism. "It feels like we're being forced to believe things we don't agree with." Aaliyah felt a pang of disappointment, but knew she had to address the concern. "It's not about forcing beliefs," she replied, her voice steady. "It's about understanding different perspectives and creating a space where everyone feels valued. We're not asking you to abandon your beliefs. We're inviting you to consider the experiences of others." The audience murmured in agreement, but Aaliyah could see that the man remained unconvinced. He continued to press the issue, challenging the speakers and dismissing their experiences. As the tension mounted, Brittany stepped forward, her voice firm. "I understand where you're coming from, but I think you're missing the point. It's not about invalidating your beliefs. It's about recognizing that other people's experiences are just as valid. We all have our stories, and we can learn from each other." The man scoffed but fell silent, clearly taken aback by Brittany's assertiveness. Aaliyah felt a surge of pride for her colleague. Brittany had come a long way, and it was empowering to see her stand up for what was right. As the discussion continued, Aaliyah felt optimistic. Despite the pushback, the overall atmosphere was one of growth and understanding. Attendees asked questions, shared their stories, and engaged in respectful dialogue. Aaliyah couldn't help but smile. This was the change she had envisioned. After the panel, people lingered, mingling and discussing the topics that had been raised. Aaliyah moved through the crowd, engaging with attendees and encouraging further conversation. She spotted the man who had challenged the panel earlier, speaking quietly with another attendee. "Hey there," Aaliyah said, approaching him. "I appreciate your willingness to engage in this discussion." He looked up, his expression a mix of gratitude and uncertainty. "I didn't mean to be so confrontational earlier," he admitted. "It's just hard for me to wrap my head around some of this." "That's okay," Aaliyah replied, her tone understanding. "It's a complex issue, and it takes time to process. The important thing is that you're here and willing to listen." He nodded, and Aaliyah could see a shift in his demeanor. "I'll try to be more open-minded," he said, a hint of sincerity in his voice. As Aaliyah walked away, she felt a sense of accomplishment. Change was happening, slowly but surely, and she was proud to be a part of it. But as the evening wound down and patrons began to exit, Aaliyah noticed Brittany standing off to the side, her expression troubled. Aaliyah approached her, concern etched across her face. "Hey, are you okay?" Aaliyah asked gently. Brittany looked up, her eyes filled with uncertainty. I thought today would be a turning point for everyone, but I still feel like some people just don't get it." "It's a process," Aaliyah reassured her. "Change doesn't happen overnight. The important thing is that we've started the conversation." Brittany nodded, but Aaliyah could sense the weight of disappointment in her posture. "I just want to make a difference," she admitted. "I don't want to go back to how things were." Aaliyah placed a reassuring hand on Brittany's shoulder. "You're already making a difference. Every time you stand up for inclusivity, you're creating ripples of change. It's not easy, but you've got the heart for it." As they stood together, Aaliyah felt a surge of determination. They were in this together, and with each conversation, each event, they were paving the way for a more inclusive future. The weeks following the community event at the cafe were a whirlwind of activity and growth. Aaliyah and Brittany continued to work together, organizing more workshops and discussions that aimed to bridge gaps within the community. Each event drew in more patrons, creating a vibrant space where people could come together to share their experiences and learn from one another. The cafe had truly transformed into a hub of inclusivity, a testament to the power of dialogue. However, Aaliyah remained aware of the challenges that lay ahead. Change was often met with resistance, and she knew that not everyone in the community supported the initiatives. One afternoon, as she prepared for another event, she received a message from Michael, the cafe manager, requesting a meeting. "Aaliyah, can you come to my office for a moment?" he texted. Aaliyah felt a knot in her stomach as she made her way to the back of the cafe. She had been feeling a bit overwhelmed lately, and she hoped that Michael's message wasn't about any negative feedback regarding their recent efforts. As she entered his office, Michael was seated at his desk, his expression serious but kind. "Thanks for coming in, Aaliyah. I wanted to talk to you about something important." She nodded, her heart racing. "Is everything okay?" "For the most part, yes," he replied. "But I have received some complaints from a few patrons who feel that the cafe is becoming too focused on social issues. They believe it's affecting the atmosphere." Aaliyah felt her stomach drop. "I see," she said slowly. "What kind of complaints?" Michael leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled. "Some customers feel that the discussions we've been having are alienating. They believe that we're pushing an agenda instead of just being a cafe." Aaliyah took a deep breath. She understood that change was often met with skepticism, especially from those who had not experienced the challenges being discussed. "I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, Michael, but I also believe that fostering an inclusive environment is essential for our community." "I agree with you," Michael said, nodding, "but we need to find a balance. Perhaps we could incorporate lighter events alongside our discussions, something that attracts a broader audience." Aaliyah considered his suggestion. "That could work. We could host open mic nights or art showcases featuring local talent. It would allow us to celebrate diversity in a more informal setting." "Exactly," Michael replied, visibly relieved. "I think it's important that we show patrons that we're still a cafe first and foremost, while also being committed to inclusivity." As they discussed the new ideas, Aaliyah felt a renewed sense of purpose. She realized that fostering change didn't mean alienating others. It meant inviting them into the conversation in a way that felt accessible. After the meeting, Aaliyah approached Brittany, who was busy restocking supplies. "I just met with Michael, and we talked about incorporating lighter events into our schedule," she said, her enthusiasm bubbling over. "I think it will help us reach a broader audience." Brittany raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What do you have in mind?" "Open mic nights, art showcases, maybe even community potlucks," Aaliyah suggested. "It's a way to celebrate our diversity while keeping the cafe's welcoming vibe." Brittany's face lit up with excitement. "I love that idea. We could invite local artists to showcase their work and even have some of our patrons share their stories. It would be a great way to keep the conversation going without feeling too formal." As they brainstormed, Aaliyah felt a sense of camaraderie with Brittany that had grown deeper over the past few weeks. They were no longer just colleagues. They were partners in creating a more inclusive space. Aaliyah and Brittany worked tirelessly to organize the first open mic night. They reached out to local artists, promoting the event through social media and word of mouth. The night of the event, the cafe buzzed with anticipation as patrons filled the seats, eager to participate in the celebration. As the evening unfolded, Aaliyah watched in awe as local musicians took the stage, sharing their stories and talents. The atmosphere was electric, filled with laughter, applause, and the sounds of diverse voices coming together. It was a far cry from the tensions that had once filled the space. Midway through the evening, Aaliyah climbed onto the small stage to address the crowd. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she began, her heart swelling with pride. "This cafe has always been about community, and tonight we're celebrating that spirit. Let's continue to uplift one another and create a space where everyone feels valued." As she spoke, Aaliyah caught sight of the man who had challenged her at the panel discussion, sitting at a table near the front. He raised his glass in acknowledgement, a smile on his face. The moment felt like a victory, a testament to the power of connection and understanding. As the night went on, patrons shared their own stories, sang and performed poetry. Aaliyah felt a sense of belonging wash over her. This was what she had envisioned, a space where everyone could come together, share their experiences, and learn from one another. After the last performance, the crowd erupted in applause. Aaliyah and Brittany exchanged proud smiles, knowing that they had created something special. As the evening wound down, patrons lingered, chatting and connecting over shared experiences. In the midst of the celebration, Aaliyah felt a tap on her shoulder. She turned to see Brittany standing there, her eyes shining with excitement. "We did it," Brittany exclaimed. "Tonight was amazing," Aaliyah beamed. "It really was. I'm so proud of what we've accomplished together." As they celebrated their success, Aaliyah realized that their journey was far from over. Change would require ongoing effort and dedication, but they had taken the first steps toward creating a more inclusive environment. The following weeks saw more successful events, each one fostering a sense of community and connection. Aaliyah felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that they were making a difference. One afternoon, as Aaliyah stood behind the counter, serving customers, she spotted Michael speaking with Brittany. He gestured toward her, and Aaliyah felt a wave of curiosity wash over her. When he turned to her, he wore a look of pride. "Aaliyah, I wanted to let you know that the feedback from the community has been overwhelmingly positive," he said. "People are excited about the changes we're making. Thank you for your dedication." "It's a team effort," Aaliyah replied, her heart swelling. "Brittany has been a huge part of this." As Brittany beamed at the praise, Aaliyah felt a sense of hope. They had started a movement, one that had the potential to inspire others beyond the cafe. With each passing day, the cafe became more than just a business. It transformed into a beacon of hope and unity. Aaliyah's vision of inclusivity was becoming a reality, and she felt empowered to continue the work they had begun. As she closed the cafe that evening, Aaliyah reflected on the journey she had taken. It had been filled with challenges and triumphs, but ultimately, it had led to a deeper understanding of the power of community. Aaliyah smiled as she locked the door, feeling a sense of purpose and fulfillment. She had made a difference, and she was determined to keep pushing for change. You've made it to the end. If you enjoyed this story, I am confident that you'll love the next one appearing on the screen now. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and please give this video a like. I'll see you in the next one.